What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
All right, well, I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and begin. And today is Wednesday, of course, always, June 15th, 2022. And everybody has been waiting with bated breath to hear.
What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
And now our guest is going to leave and say, what have I gotten myself into? Well, welcome, everyone. Welcome to Every Other Wednesday. It is Every Other Wednesday, and I'm Richard Haddon. I'm an author and speaker. I'm the author of Contented Cows Still Give Better Milk and a few other things. I'm located in Jacksonville, Florida, where right now it is only 90, just went up to 91 degrees. So not too bad. It is June the 15th, after all. I'd like to introduce my good friend, Sanjay Nath. Well, I just did, and he's going to introduce our guest today. Sanjay?
Thank you. My name is Sanjay Nath. I'm based just outside of Toronto, Ontario. And here at Every Other Wednesday, what we do is we kind of tackle and discuss organizational culture issues. And when we run out of things to say, which is very often, but we'll never admit it, and we'll talk about how we have nothing to say, which reminds me of a quote: there's nothing wrong with having nothing to say unless you insist on saying it. Anyways, what we do is we try to bring in experts that can share and impart wisdom to our audience. And we're really fortunate today, brought in a gentleman, and I say gentleman in quotes, is Peter Fanous. Now, the way Peter and I met was he was in an audience that I spoke at a bazillion years ago. I want to say 2012. And he at the time was running, I think at the time you were only running one organization, and brought me into to do some work with the organization, and didn't learn from his mistakes and brought me into another. Then he started up another organization, was running two simultaneously. And then he brought me into the second one. And then after 21 years with that one organization, he went on to his current role, which he's vice president of Paymentus and doing some fancy stuff. His role when he started with the original company called Harris Computers, I believe he was like one of the first 30, 50 employees. He was really in the infancy of it. But when you left Harris, where's what, 15,000 employees? Something like that?
Yeah, just under that.
And you were running two of their divisions. They actually have a really unique model. They eat companies constantly. In the time you were there, they probably did maybe 200 acquisitions or something. And they have self-sustaining organizations, entity. So you were the CEO of two organizations. So you have a tremendous amount of experience, both from a organizing management standpoint, but also in terms of culture and how to create and foster an environment. So first of all, I want to say welcome. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. A big virtual round of applause.
Thank you. I will say,
and while we're thanking Peter for being here, we should acknowledge some people who aren't here. And some of you may have come to hear the advertised guest, but those of you probably looked and said, oh, Peter Fanous is going to be here. I'm definitely coming. I'm going to bring everybody I know. But our original guest, Dr. Sanjay Sharma, was not able to be here today at the last minute. We will reschedule, and we will see him again before too long. And then, of course, our compadres, Jeff Tobe and Michael Kerr, are off actually working today, and I will not be working until tomorrow. So, and Sanjay, I don't know, when is your next gig?
I have an allergy to working, and so I'm going to stop working here and let Peter talk. So give us the 411. What's your background and your evolution of how the heck you got to be here?
Well, I will say, first of all, Sanjay, that the introduction you gave me, I think you know more of me than my wife knows of my professional career. So kudos to you for remembering all of that.
Actually, wait, one more thing I forgot to mention. He is a ridiculously avid Raptors fan.
Oh, big time. I would say Toronto Maple Leafs as well, but that gives me heartburn. As my machine comes up and says it needs to reboot. So I'm going to ignore this message and we'll see if it goes away.
Perfect. So is that how you manage when issues come up, you ignore them and hope they go away? And what does that do to culture?
No, this is, first of all, thank you guys for having me. This is fantastic. Sanjay and I go way back at least a decade now. I'd like to say now we're also personally connected, not just professionally connected. So it's always great to spend time with you, Sanjay.
Awesome, thank you. And again, I do appreciate you doing this. Can you give us a little bit of the evolution of your time at Harris? Because again, being one of the early employees to leading a relatively large organization, how did that how did that transpire, and what were kind of some of the milestones along the way?
Yeah, so I got a job early on after graduating from university here in Toronto. It was a kind of a technical job. So, getting my hands dirty, traveling from client to client, taking customers live, as we would say. And over the years, that then transformed into a sales role, and then into a couple of different, minor management roles. And it was about maybe 10 years in or 9 years into my employment at Harris that I took on the first senior VP role. And then from there, that evolved into running a business and then a second business, as Sanjay said. So a lot of changes along the way, a lot of people along the way, a lot of process along the way. But culture, I'll tell you, is one thing. And I know that's the topic of today's theme is, that's the one thing that I would say stayed the exact same throughout the entire time I was there. I was there just under 22 years. We had a phenomenal leader. His name is Jeff Bender. Sanjay's met him many times. And for him, it was all about the core values of the business and not just preaching it, but embodying it, practicing it, using it every single day in your tool bag. And I think that's why that company continues to be successful.
Peter,
yeah.
Was he the founder of the company?
No, it's a publicly traded company. Like me, he was brought in very early.
Okay.
But made CEO in 2001 or 2002, I believe, Richard.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the organization takes on the image of its leader, and it did that with Jeff.
Yeah.
And it's been great.
And
well, the reason that I asked is because, when you talk about a very small company and then growing to such a huge organization, a lot of the folks in our audience would tell us that they have experienced companies where that culture changed massively, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. You're telling me that what you saw when it was a very small company was essentially the same as what it was when it was a very large organization. I wonder how you did that. How do you swing that?
Yeah, so Harris is a unique, as Sanjay kind of alluded to in the beginning, it's a unique collection of many businesses that still operate as these small businesses, Richard, that you're talking about. So as an example, I was brought into the Harris family through an acquisition in 2006. And we were a small mom and pop shop, a couple hundred employees, and we remained that type of business, even though we were now purchased by Harris. But the difference is the Harris values, the Harris culture, the Harris best practices were then laid on us as we became Harris. So, we went out and then we preached the word, we preached the core values to all of our employees and the companies that we continued to buy in. And it just became this huge ball of, businesses that were collected over the years that continued to maintain its identity as these small businesses with the core values kind of overlaying all of that. So it's a unique situation, but one where I thought was, employees continue to stay there because of that.
So my experience with Harris was they brought me in because they were doing a retreat in New York, and I want to say it was 2012. And at the time, there was about 125 people in that room. And those 125 people were the leaders of the sub-businesses within Harris.
Right.
And right there, the fact that they did that retreat, and I don't know how long they've been doing it, but that to me speaks of the importance of culture within the organization, right? They were saying, let's bring in our senior leadership. Let's make sure that they are equipped, they are empowered, that they're having fun, that they are buying in. So there's an example of how one of the ways Harris was, infusing these core values. Can you speak to some of the other ways in which they did that?
Yeah, actually, and I will update you. Even though I'm not with the organization anymore, last week, it was their annual retreat, and they had 500 of their leaders. So 125, 8, 9, 10 years ago is now 500 of its senior leaders. So, but there's many other ways. So, you're talking about that once a year that, all the leaders get together. But throughout the year, there are many functional best practices, meaning all the folks that run sales from all the businesses would get together. So not all the leaders of all the businesses, but these sub leaders or these functional leaders within the businesses. So it was always about knowledge sharing. But I will say this, no matter what meeting you attended, no matter what session you attended, or no matter what seminar you attended, we always started the same way. And that was a repeat of the core values. The core values that, we not just preach about, but as I said, we practice about. And, I'll just share some of them with you.
I was going to say, what are some of those core values?
So the first one is respect of the individual. That's first and foremost. And if you can't do that, there's the door, help yourself out, make sure it doesn't hit you on the way out. But ARO, accountability, responsibility, and ownership. That was a big one for us. Sharing knowledge, transparency, open and honest communication. My favorite one is bad news doesn't get better with time. And the way our leader used to say this was, unlike red wine, which does get better with time, bad news does not. And he goes on to give a lot of metaphors and examples as to why, procrastination is not going to do any well. Solutions, not problems. Empowerment at the point of contact. So he was a big believer, as am I, in pushing the decision making down to the level where it needs to be. A lot of people sit in these ivory towers and they make decisions, but they're so far removed from what's really happening that they don't know what decision to make. So empowerment at the point of contact. And then the last one was understanding reality and making difficult decisions. Sounds easy, very difficult. Those difficult conversations to have with employees or peers or coworkers, whoever it is not easy. And for Jeff and for the rest of the organization to ensure that this was a core value, it gave an environment of, constant feedback. Positive, negative, constructive, call it whatever you want, but it was constant feedback. And I think, these core values, in my opinion, are the reason why I stayed there for 22 years and why many people stay there for 2+ decades. So I'm just one example of many that have had a long career with Harris and Constellation, who was Harris's parent company for that many years.
By the way, if you are a stock market follower, Constellation Software, which has 4 companies, Harris being one of them, and then Harris is a combination of a bunch of other companies, their stock price over the last 20 years has done this. It's completely straight up. You can check it out. You did something really interesting, Pete, here on this call, and it's something we talk about ad nauseum, this idea of people, all the corporations have their core values, and they throw them up on the wall and they throw them up on a plaque, and it's just lip service. But we ask you to mention them, and you did not look at any notes. You just started spewing them out. Maybe in order, maybe not, it doesn't matter. But you just legitimately know them, and you spoke to them. So I'm going to piggyback off that. In how many ever hundreds of acquisitions that Harris has done, and I know they have a formula, and they look and they go and they target these people, and they've had great success at it. But even with great success, there's got to be a couple of duds. There's got to be some acquisitions where the people were wrong, the numbers were fudged, whatever. I don't care what the reason is, but when it is not a fit, what is the approach?
Yeah. So I can tell you their number one business strategy is to buy and hold forever. So even though when I say we, I'm still putting on the Harris hat, but even though a bad business potentially was purchased, it is owned by Harris or Constellation for life. They don't spin it off. So what happens in a situation like that? Well, it's like you said, it's a formula, it's a model. We pay X amount for a business based on a lot of these assumptions. Assumptions based on the past, assumptions based on the future. And a lot of times those assumptions don't come forward, right? I thought I can sell 10 more units of your product to this new customer base after we bought you. Well, and that doesn't happen. So it's constantly evaluating top line revenue, bottom line costs, making adjustments as you go. But these are business challenges that I'd say anybody who runs a business has on a daily basis, whether you acquire it or you don't acquire. But yeah, there's been a lot of duds, as you say, Sanjay. And I think Jeff will tell you that there's been a lot of duds and give you many examples of these duds. But again, at the end of the day, these are the assumptions that we as leaders made to put that purchase price together. Therefore, it's on us to either, determine what other options, experiments we can try to generate more revenue, to reduce cost, increase margins, to reduce third-party costs. There's so many different ways and levers that you can pull to kind of make, have some of these assumptions come to fruition. You follow me?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing, Pete, is you're talking about, you're using a lot of business oriented terms. It sounds like it's very much bottom line oriented. This is a capitalist business in business to make money. And yet you're talking about a positive people culture. And sometimes people say, oh, you can't have both at the same time. We know that's not true. Everybody on the call knows that's not true. But can you tell us any stories about some things that either happened there, or, and I know we want to at some point hear about where you are now at Paymentus, but I'd love to hear some stories of how the culture was played out. How did it come to life in either that organization or the one you're in now?
Yeah. So, and that's a great segue into, so I would say the first thing we do when we buy a business is we talk about the people, because the business is the people, period. No people, no business makes no sense. So the people are the foundation of that business. And really, when we went and bought businesses, those people needed to come with the business. Otherwise, transaction wouldn't happen. So we're not just out there buying and spending money and just trying to bring on more assets. It's not about that. It's about acquiring the people behind it that make it successful. So we know it's the people, it's the culture, it's their values that they bring forward that will make that business successful or not in the future. And I think, so when we talk to acquisitions, I can give you some examples. It's really all about the people. So the first thing we do is we do a headcount analysis, Richard. We talk about, all the employees, their tenures. Sometimes we get into family situations, so what's their family makeup like? So we need to understand the story behind most of these employees. Very rarely would you see any acquisition involving people being cut. So if there is even overlap of roles, Harris has done a phenomenal job because of the size of it, is to try to find that person in another role somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because you're bringing a lot of domain knowledge over. So, we know that's important. There's many stories, Richard, where I can give you where, first thing we do is we go through the data, we understand the financials, and then we go through the headcount, understand all the individuals we're talking about. And then you try to bring the two together. And we've had many examples where specific owners who wanted to sell, most of the owner, one more thing I wish I should mention, we love businesses where the owners are coming over as well. So, if you're a 75-year-old, you've been in the business for 55 years, it's time to pass on. We get that. We understand that. A lot of times we'll ask you to stay on for at least a year to see that transition. But most of the times, if you look at the successful businesses versus the unsuccessful ones, it's when the owners, the people that love what they have done, it's their baby, it's their pride. They've come over and now they're running that business under the Harris model. Those are the most successful businesses. And I will say a lot of them, I shouldn't say a lot of them, some of them have struggled with corporate mentality versus the way they used to run it. Yeah. And some of them said, after a year or two, I've made my money. Thank you very much. This corporate thing is not for me. I'm going to go and try something different.
Like Costa Rica or something, right?
Yeah. We've had many of those examples, but today the most successful businesses today, and Sanjay, the ones you've worked with are the ones where I exactly describe what happens is with the owner sells to Harris, stays along with the business, 10, 15, 20 years later is still running that business or something else within Harris.
Okay, so you were running two businesses, Cogsdale and Advanced Utilities. One was based in Toronto, one was based in PEI. And for the people who don't know the geography, you're looking at a 2-hour flight difference and a time zone change. So you were I don't know what we were, CEO, president, I don't even know what your official title was, but basically.
And as the American on the call, I will just translate PEI as Prince Edward Island.
Oh, there you go, sorry. So you were pulling an Elon Musk here. You had two organizations. Roughly how large from a people standpoint was each organization?
So the one in Toronto was about a 200 and the one in Prince Edward Island was about 150. So, small to mid-sized businesses.
Okay. And so how is that? Because now all of a sudden, you're saying when you have the owner operated model and the owner is passionate and excited and it's their baby, you're an outsider. So it's not your business per se. And not only is it not your business, it's not your business times two. So how do you get the buy-in from everyone down in kind of going, this is, the language I've often used is I say, how do we get people so that they get to go to work, they don't have to go to work?
Right. And can I add a bit more color to that, Sanjay? Advanced and Cogsdale were direct competitors of each other.
Nice.
So again, the Harris model.
Did you have to go to therapy for that?
I'm still through therapy, Richard.
Yeah, exactly. He has a whole list of issues, but we won't go there. We only have 45 minutes today.
Again, Harris's model is to buy and hold. So we bought, all the competitors to really own the market share. So, Sanjay's talking about 2 businesses that I ever saw, but really there were 6 other businesses that we owned as Harris that directly competed against each other. But, these are RFP processes, tender processes. So there's a process to win a deal. In terms of the management, I will say this. I came from the advanced business, so they knew me. I knew that from ground up. That was kind of easy. When I went to Cogsdale, several years ago, I would say I was met with a lot of resistance. Oh my God, you're from the enemy. You're the competitor. You're going to change us to them. You're going to make us look like them. We don't want to look like that. We're our own. We're, islanders. You need to leave us alone. It was resistance at its finest. And I would say it took me probably the better part of 2 or 3 months to kind of peel back the layers and make people.
I thought you were going to say 2 or 3 years.
No, yeah. I was only there for about 3 years, but okay. I said, what I was thinking was peeling back all the layers so that people understand that I'm in this for them to win, because when they win, I win. That was the model. That was the beauty of the model. And in terms of compensation, the better that business did, the better I did, the better my management team did. So it was a win-win. And I will say this, and this is going to sound a bit rough, but this is what I had to do. I had to remove 3 of the 4 vice presidents in that business, all for different reasons, not to prove a point, but to get some of that old mentality out. We needed new ideas. And I will tell you, the greatest achievement I have in my career was when I found 3 new VPs, and it took a course of about a year to find them all. And when you sat them all down at a table and you heard those conversations, they were very different from the first, when the other 4 were at the table. They got it. And then from there, that business continued to double, quadruple. It is probably one of the best running businesses today. That's because I'm now gone. But no, it's, sometimes you have to make some of those difficult decisions. And, it took, as I said, Richard, probably 2-3 months. And then about a year to get the rest of the players in. Mm-hmm. And man, did they ever buy into that. And it was phenomenal to sit back and watch.
Well, I'm assuming that you had some people who were able to make the shift and whose culture and whose values were aligned with the new company. There were just 3 that for some reason couldn't. And I'm assuming that if they could have changed, if they had changed, you would have kept them as part of the organization.
Absolutely. And I would say the biggest thing they struggled with was accountability. It was an organization, and I don't want to make it sound like the organization was broken, because clearly it was working. It was doing some good things.
Wouldn't have bought it otherwise, yeah.
Right. But it's losing market share. The other businesses were beating it. So, they knew they needed to look in the mirror. And I would say the biggest issue that they faced was holding themselves and other people accountable. Cool. Example. Richard, you would tell me on this call that you're going to get a report done and you'll have it to me by Friday, and we'll talk about it on Monday's call. Well, Friday comes, no report. Monday, Richard comes up with an excuse. Okay, I might let it slide 1 week. The second week, the same thing. Finally, people said, stop, Richard, you owe it to us. You owe it to you. So people start to hold other people accountable. And when you get an organization where accountability is a core value, which it was, man, you get people rowing in the same direction. It's amazing what a company can do and an organization can do at that point. And they embody that. I'm so proud of that business.
And that accountability from a peer level is so much more powerful than when you're going, I'm yelling at you because I'm more important than you. When you get that peer level, then it's virtually unbreakable. We have a question here from in the chat box. And by the way, if anyone has any questions, by all means, please call in. Yeah. Let's stump the chump here.
Just anything about any of Pete's ideas, thoughts on culture. It's open season for that.
So the question says, in businesses that are trying to cut employees and become more automated, i.e. using robots, will core values be relevant? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think core values, behind robots will always be people. I still think there's going to be people in any organization, maybe not 100, but maybe 50, or maybe not 50, maybe 20. But it's exciting to watch technology evolve as we go. But yeah, I think core values, listen, I have core values in my house. Sanjay, you have core values in your house. Richard, you have core values amongst your family. it's in everything we do, and we just take that to our place of work. So I would say I'm not an expert in this area, but I would say, yeah, absolutely. If there's people behind a business, you need core values. And you know what? Look, I've worked for other businesses that were dysfunctional. And what I mean by dysfunctional is they had these core values, they talked about these core values, but they never practiced these core values. And that is detrimental, in my opinion, to any business. And that's what people leave all the time.
As much as I hate to do it, I will agree with Pete on this, that the core values are always present in anything and everything you do. What changes is how you manifest. I was actually doing an interview with a guy who was doing a podcast who was a recovering accountant. And so we were talking, and it was relevant in the conversation. I said to him, you understand what you're doing now is essentially what you're doing when you were an accountant. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, forget about the actual form of what you're doing. But I said, why did you want to become an accountant? And then we kind of went through and he gave me a list. He said, well, it made me some money. It allowed me to use my expertise. It was secure, blah, blah, blah. And he made a big list. I said, so those are like the core values of what you wanted to do. Now he said, being a podcaster, does it allow you to make some money, use your strength, et cetera, et cetera. So the core values are there. They just manifest themselves differently. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. It doesn't matter, because everything you do, whether you're fixing the robot or hiring someone to fix the robot, or if you're talking about respect, you can respect in every level. So yeah.
So I heard you call yourself a podcaster. Can I now officially put it on my resume that I'm a podcaster?
No, we run a vlog, a video log. It's a vlog.
A vodcast.
Vlog.
Okay. So
hey, Stephen has a good question. Stephen always has good questions, but I don't know. You were going to jump in with something, Sanjay?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah. So Stephen says, what core value did you try and drop?
What core value did we try and drop? Oh man, that's a great question. And I
told you our audience they're no slouches. No slouches.
But I think I'm going to give the most boring answer, because I think the core values that I talked about were the ones that were there from the very beginning. I'll be honest with you, Stephen, I can't think of one that we've ever tried and dropped. There's many things you try from a strategic perspective, but from a core value perspective, those have been the core, I would say, since the beginning of time of our company. So,
but where did the values come from? Were they Jeff Bender's babies, or did they predate him, or do you know the history?
Yeah. I think so. I can speak to the company I'm with now, but yes, back to Jeff Bender. So, Jeff Bender did bring a lot of these forward, and a lot of those were core values that his peers also had from the other businesses within Constellation. So, but I'll say this, now that I'm at this new company for about a year and a half, I brought some of these core values with me that they did not have. I added a couple more as well, but I will say that, joining this new company I'm with, this is a company that talked about core values. I would say didn't really practice a lot of these core values. So today, a lot of my time, is with the management team and their leadership team on driving these core values and practicing it, not just preaching it. Again, to me, that's the difference between functional and dysfunctional. So no, I would say I don't have any experience myself with trying something and dropping something with respect to core values. I feel that many other things, but I'd say with core values, it's kind of been constant for, at least from my time.
Okay.
All right.
We have another question, and this is from Frederick. It says, I struggle with bring solutions, not problems. I think he's asking for some clarification on what that means, because then he goes on to say, does this prevent employees from bringing seemingly unsolvable issues or those that require creative thinking because they don't want to appear as antithetical to the value? Does it create a conflict-averse culture? On some of the best teams, problems are surfaced and worked, even if it is uncomfortable, as a team to ensure the solution is a best possible approach.
Right.
So I'm sure that does not mean don't bring me any problems. But tell us what that does mean to you in terms of the solution orientedness to that core value.
Right. So when I would get up and speak to these companies and I talk about the core values, I would always present this one by saying this: look, when I get up in the morning, I got 2 kids, a dog, a wife. I have lots of problems. Like we all have lots of problems, right? Kids are, one's sick, this one's running around going, what the hell am I doing? This and that. So you're already going to work, 30 minutes, an hour after you've woken up with lots of problems. I don't need more problems. When I get to work, I want to talk about solutions. And really, what is that? I'm not suggesting, Richard, you're going to come up with the best solution, or Sanjay or I. We're going to sit down as a group and we're going to talk about all the possible solutions. But if you're only focused on the problem, you're never going to be solutions oriented. You're never going to come up with that right, that problem solving mentality or that solution to fix that problem. So for this,
but you're not saying don't make us aware of problems, because you just said a little while ago that bad news doesn't get better with age. So if there is bad news, if there is a problem, bring it to the table. Exactly. Let's approach it from the point of view there is a solution to that, and we're going to find it together.
Exactly. By the way, if the 3 of us are bringing solutions, chances are mine would be best. I just wanted to clarify that.
It'd certainly be mathematically, it would be something that could be solved mathematically anyway.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about transition. So you're at Harris Forever. You're now with Paymentus. What are you doing with Paymentus? And you've already talked a bit about your learnings that you brought forward, but update us on the difference in the culture and within the organization, and you give us some talk on that. And how big is Paymentus?
And what does Paymentus do? I mean, I know the answer to that, but I want you to tell us.
I'll start with so what's the differences? The difference is night and day. So what does Paymentus do? Paymentus does online payments, online customer portal. So if you ever went online to pay a bill, a utility bill, chances are it's probably our portal, and then you type in your credit card. It's us that also clears that credit card from a security perspective. How big is it? They're about 1,300, almost 1,400 employees. Toronto, Charlotte, Seattle, Virginia are kind of the largest offices we have. Just IPO'd last year in May. And of course, like every other, stock price has plummeted down. But anyways, it's a great company, lots of growth, lots of challenges. And when I say night and day, I will say this: as much as I'm trying to bring, the core values, the culture, trying to change things from the ground up, the reality is there is a lot of bad habits that have been there for a long, long time. And I'll tell you, one of my biggest frustrations is I want this to work this fast. Sanjay knows me. I've got no patience. I've got zero patience, meaning I want this done and I want it done now. And the reality is you have to have patience when it comes to something like this. So as much as we're trying to change some of these core values, some of this ways of thinking, and I thought I could come in and do this, give me a couple of days, I'll get up, I'll talk to people and it'll be done. And it's not that easy. So it's constant reminders. It's constantly talking with the management team and all the employees, making sure they understand what these core values are. But I'll say the biggest difference, and the thing I missed the most from Harris compared to where I am today, is the education factor. Harris does a phenomenal job. I just talked about last week, they brought 500 leaders into a single room and for 3 days just discussed best practices. And to me, that's educational. And I'm trying to do that. So we're actually going to hold our first one actually next Tuesday in Charlotte. We're all flying in. We're going to start this. It's not 500 people, but hopefully, over time it grows. But, getting people in the same room and talking about, I always say this, there's a problem. So Richard, you have a problem you're trying to solve. There's probably somebody in this room that has had the exact same problem as you. Yeah. Why do you want to try to reinvent them? And that's the whole concept with Harris that I'm trying to bring over to Paymentus, and we'll see where it goes.
I'm slightly off topic here, but you and I met for lunch semi-recently, a couple of weeks ago, and you referred to Paymentus as a startup. And you and I had a discussion about that. I'm like, they're not a startup. What is that? And so can you share your 2 cents on that? And just in terms, because to me, that is very much related to culture, because to me, culture is very much the mindset of the organization. But
yeah. And I don't mean it in a derogatory word, and I don't mean it in a negative way. When I say a startup, I mean, as a startup company, you have the mentality of just go and get the win, just go get that new customer. regardless of what it takes. And, if you got to drop the price, drop the price. And if you got to, and to me, some of that is true. And, winning is obviously, sales is what makes, companies grow. But there's got to be economics behind it. Some sales just don't make sense. Some sales you just need to walk away from because the numbers don't make sense, or you think it's going to be a bad customer for you, then, let's just move on. And I think it's that mentality that Harris has that this company I'm with today still doesn't have. They're just out there trying to get market share and new logos, regardless of the economics. And that's what I mean by startup versus a grow up. And when you couple culture, and to me, accountability is something that, a lot of people here struggle with. We got to get past that in order to get past that, that startup phase. And it's coming. It's, it's work in progress. But as I said, it's a lot harder than I ever thought it would be.
So, sorry, is grow up different from grow up? I just want to know.
It's with a U, not an O. All right, get your head out.
All right, fair enough. Sometimes the American accents, that throws me off.
Yeah.
So, okay, looking back, you've been at this for 20 plus years. You go back and you visit young Pete with more hair, a little less gray in the beard. What do you tell yourself? What would some of the lessons learned now that would have been more helpful knowing 15, 20 years ago?
Take more risk. Take a lot more risk early on. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times young people, young entrepreneurs, young leaders get paralyzed with making decisions, or, what, should I just do it? Do I not do it? And, I'm not saying take uncalculated risks, but there's got to be times where you just follow your gut. And, I know something is telling you this way, but your gut says this, you just got to take more risk. I wish, if I can go back even 10 years ago, is take more risks. And if you're going to fail fast. And I think these are lessons that I've learned over the years. A lot of times no, I didn't fail yet. No, we're going to, and you throw more money at it. No. And it's the pride and it's the ego. And until you realize that, pride and ego don't, they can't exist in any business if you want to be successful. And if you, come to
Tesla's doing pretty well. Oh, that's another subject. Okay. Yeah.
I just bought my first Tesla. So hold on. But fail fast. And then the other thing is, I have now realized, and I've done this over the last maybe 5 or 6 years. So Sanjay, the teams I've built around me, I got 2 simple models. Number 1, hire the best. And number 2, you need to hire much smarter people than you and surround yourself with them. That's it. So when you look at my leadership team, they are much smarter. They are better than me. They have more experience than me, but that's what makes this team great. And I'm not afraid to say it as a leader. So, as leaders, if you can do that, I honestly believe you're building the best organization.
Going back to your first point, this idea of taking the risk, how does company culture feed into that? Because your 2 organizations, like you said, they're very different. I'm assuming one is going to be more open to you taking risks than the other. And how do you foster that environment?
Yeah, so the 2 core values I mentioned that really talk about what you just said there with taking risk is empowerment at the point of contact, and bad news doesn't get better with time. So empowerment means really no matter where you are in the organization, I want you to think like an owner. What would you do in this situation? Don't run up, decisions up the chain. Make that decision that you think is best at this moment for the situation you're in. And if you make a mistake, that's fine. That's great. That's how we learn. Just try not to make the same mistake again.
Yeah, and then there has to be some sense of safety there. Unless I'm doing stuff that's just reckless and foolish, that I'm going to be protected with that happening.
Of course, and that's the environment you create. And bad news doesn't get better with time is, don't try to hide things. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about solutions, because today, if you talk about the solution, if you talk about possible options today when the problem is present, good news is you'll have options. If you procrastinate a day to a week, chances are those options that were available to you right there are no longer available to you here. So let's talk about, it right now when all these options are on the table. Let's move forward. So yeah, great question. I think those are the 2 core values, in my opinion, that really promote experimenting and trying and taking risks.
And I'm a probability guy too. I love numbers. And so what happens is people ignore a problem and it goes away 1 in 50 times. And 49 other times it actually gets worse. And what we do is we justify that going, well, the one time it worked. Yeah, well, the one time you bought the lottery ticket, it worked too, right? So you can't expect to win.
Not me. That's never happened. Yeah. You know, Sanjay, we ought to do a whole episode on a culture of risk at some point. Let's write that down on our list.
All right.
Of things to do. That's great. Well, Pete, this has been great. Thank you. What we always find is that we go into a time warp when we get into this. And so now we have like 2 minutes and 45 seconds left. So any closing final thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, you know, I was a little cocky, you know, graduate at a university that took a job and thought I could change the world. And, you know, but, you know, all I did is I put my head down, I worked hard, and there's many people that do that. Worked for a great organization, had a great mentor, continued to use him as a mentor. But yeah, you know, I tell my kids today, you know, you got to be the hardest working person in the room. Like that's what people want to see. They're not, you know, you don't have to be the smartest. You just need to work hard. You got to give it that extra effort. And, you know, I see a lot of I call them kids today, but people entering the workforce today, and man, it is amazing what they can do. It is amazing. I think we're in great shape when, you know, they start to take over these roles and become leaders themselves, because man, are they ever bright. So yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Awesome. Listen, Pete, I want to say thank you so much. You were on the list of guests I wanted. However, you came in last minute. I called you a couple hours ago. You rearranged your schedule to be here. You gave us some fantastic insights.
Absolutely.
Tremendous value for the group. Want to say thank you. I think that at some point we may have to harass you again to come back to figure out, you know, to empty the second half of your brain so that we can get some more nuggets.
Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And
thank you.
Steve, Richard, nice to meet you.
Yeah, very, very good to meet you. I've been looking forward to this for hours, you know, ever since I found out you were going to be our guest. So listen, folks, we are going to be back in 2 weeks on June the 29th, and we have another fantastic guest, and her name is Erin O'Malley, and she is just one of the funniest people I have ever known, and has some great things to say about culture and connection. So you really also want to be here for that. Don't forget, you can bring Sanjay and me and Jeff and Mike in virtually to your organization. You can bring us in person if you like individually, but you can bring us in as a group virtually to do an every other Wednesday in-house. So get in touch with us. Let us know how to do that. And I think we're out. Sanjay, anything from you?
Thank you, folks. We will see you every other Wednesday.
Every other Wednesday. Thanks.
Cheers.